within the country as well. Financial markets are growing steadfastly in East Africa, and Smart 24 TV wants to be part of the growth. And we bring you regional analysis. We bring you the local analysis as well for the local stocks, the latest news coming in from the different companies that are listed. We bring you news as well coming in from central banks around the world and the central banks within the region and the continent. And our commitment to business has not been wavering for the past couple of years as Smart 24 TV, and we are very grateful that you choose us to be your number one. Now, there is definitely a lot in stock for us tonight, and one of them being a story on Kenya Airways, and we're going to be looking at what the shareholders are thinking of the next step. The company has been in the red most of the times in at least a couple of exchanges where we have seen it being cross-listed, but also in the domestic exchange, which is the Nairobi Stock Exchange. We've seen Kenya Airways still wobble the waters under the red flag. And there's been a lot of questions, more questions than answers, when it comes to how Kenya Airways is going to revamp its performance, not only in terms of the stock market, but also, most importantly, its performance as a regional carrier, as the East African regional carrier, biggest East African regional carrier. We're also looking at the Uganda Stock Exchange as well, and some of the news coming in from the different companies. What is happening at MTN Uganda? Remember, MTN also issued dividends for the third quarter of 2023, and they will be issuing dividends as well for the fourth quarter of the year 2023. Definitely something exciting for shareholders as well on the Uganda Securities Exchange. But first, let's have a look at the performance of the different companies that are listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange, first and foremost. Now, turning our eyes to the Uganda Stock Exchange, at least a total of 19 companies now are listed, including Airtel Uganda, which is the most recent listing. At the moment, Uganda Securities Exchange has at least 10 domestic listed stocks and 9 cross-listed stocks. Among these, at least by the end of today's trading session, over 6 of these companies that are listed participated in trade. Now, Uganda Securities Exchange saw a total of just 307,079 shares that were recorded in trading today, and at least 10.9 million was the total value of money that was transacted. Compared with the previous trading day, that was Friday, the 19th of January, the data shows a 38% decline in the volume, and the current market capitalization of the exchange is 15.7 trillion Ugandan shillings. Now, on average, at least over 2 companies gained, just 2 companies gained. And on the losing side, we had a couple of companies, at least about 6 in total, mostly cross-listings, actually, except Stanbic Bank Uganda. The rest are all cross-listed stocks that actually did lose on Monday. As per the trading data here with me, we have the highest volume traded by at least the company Stanbic, known as Stanbic, recording the highest volume of at least 195,530 shares. Now, Stanbic Bank Uganda was followed by the National Insurance Corporation Company, NIC, with 50,000 shares as well, and also Bank of Baroda Uganda with at least 33,901 shares, whereas Airtel Uganda had about 16,550 shares. Now, these were some of the top performers, but literally looking at the scope, when you look at the stock exchange currently, there has been a lot of interest by investors in companies such as Stanbic Bank in the recent past, MTN Uganda, as well as Bank of Baroda. But now we are looking at investors penetrating into a couple of rare stocks like NIC or the National Insurance Corporation. And with this kind of activity, if we have this continual participation, at least as per the trading data this week and the couple of coming weeks, we are most likely to end in a very strong way quarter number 1 for the year 2024. Now, looking at Airtel Uganda, for example, Airtel Uganda had 16,550 shares, and however, this ended with a loss of at least 0.08 Ugandan shillings, down to 91.92 Ugandan shillings per share, which is a little bit on the flip side, but also a good thing for Airtel, having liquidity, which keeps the stock at least very alive and active on the stock exchange. And Bank of Baroda Uganda, at least 33,901 shares traded, has closed at 15.0 Ugandan shillings, quite stagnant. Figure that we have seen since the opening of the bonus shares, or the bonus issue that was issued on the 6th of June by the company. The company was seeking funds in order to raise its minimum capital requirements, following a directive by Bank of Uganda, in which, by the way, all commercial banks are required to have a minimum capital requirement of 150 billion by the end of the year 2024. Now, 2024 is already here, and a couple of banks are still struggling, save for this particular one, Bank of Baroda Uganda. Now, as per the trading data, the Bank of Baroda Uganda stock at 33,901 shares is looking at still a price of 15 Ugandan shillings. Now, before the bonus issue, Bank of Baroda Uganda was selling way above this figure. On average, at least by the second quarter of 2023, the bank was trading at exactly about 85 Ugandan shillings on average, and they could go up sometimes up to almost 95 shillings. However, this was not able to be withstood after the issued bonus shares. How bonus shares work is that you have shareholders who are holding stock, and then you want to give them extra shares, and these extra shares are coming at a subsidized price for these shareholders, and this usually goes as well on the market, and the market movement is affected by this price, because people are going to be able to buy and sell at this period of the bonus issue are going to be investors, and they're going to be buying at a subsidized price. So that will go a long way in getting many people excited and buying more shares, but also to the detriment of a stock, the share price will be cut down, because now the bonus share, for example, was issued at 10 shillings. If it was issued at 10 shillings and the current price of the stock was 85 shillings, and most of the people are going to be buying at 10 shillings, you're going to have a drop in price. This is what we saw. And we also have something called a split share, or a share split rather. A share split where you have a stock being split as per share. For example, every share is 85 and then we split into 85 shares. That can also happen. And then, you have a share going for a shilling. So that is sort of the dynamics around the pricing for the Bank of Baroda stock. But definitely it is something that the bank has been able to cope with for the past year, 2023. And now in 2024, yes, we are seeing the bank still maintaining their price at 15 Ugandan shillings. Now, MTN Uganda traded at least about 9,375 shares and closed up at 170 shillings. MTN has also been trying their very best. And in terms of pricing, their price is a little bit higher compared to the other companies there in their league. And in this case, I'm now talking about Airtel Uganda. Both these companies listed as a result of a policy known as the National Broadband Policy. And this policy was amended in 2020 under the UCC Act in order to enable more telecoms to list. The companies that we're talking about are national telecommunications companies. These are companies that have telecommunication services across the country. And they are required currently by the Broadband Policy or National Broadband Policy, the UCC Act amended 2020 to list at least 20% of their stake on the Uganda Securities Exchange. This is exactly where the nets caught companies like MTN Uganda and Airtel Uganda. And as a result of this policy, there's two companies got to list. 2021, we had MTN, and 2023, Airtel Uganda as well came on board. Now, Airtel Uganda's listing has a lot of stories that we can actually attach to it. First and foremost, you have the listing of this company delayed. Airtel Uganda was supposed to list way back, at least a year after MTN. MTN listed in 2021. So around 2022, that's where we're expecting Airtel to list. But Airtel issued a notice saying that the conditions, the financial environmental conditions were not favorable for the company to list. And then, of course, we're going through a series of changes. It was post-COVID-19, and it was definitely during the Russia-Ukrainian invasion. It has that insurgency had just been cultivated, and there was a lot of hula baloo in the financial world, and Uganda was no exception. So you have different countries struggling and grappling with inflation and a couple of other problems. These, coupled with, of course, the post-COVID-19 pandemic period as well, there was a lot of pressure on people's pockets. And so Airtel Uganda actually did not get to list during this period. So they pushed that period to 2023, which they did fulfill finally, and actually invested in at least an IPO that cost over about 199 billion. Now, amongst these, of course, there was an under subscription. Their target was to collect at least 800 billion from both institutional investors and retail investors. That is the goal. That is what exactly they were looking at. Over 800 billion. But unfortunately, they were unable to raise this much because of a couple of factors as well. Yes, a few new investors came on board, but still not as satisfying as we could actually be expecting. So amidst all those challenges, Airtel finally was able to conclude their IPO, but it also didn't come easy, as they had to extend their IPO for almost a month or half a month in order to get to, according to their statement, in order to be able to accommodate for the new investors that were coming in at the end of the IPO. Now, on the eve, actually, the Friday before closing the IPO, NSSF, the National Security Fund, which is the biggest pension scheme in Uganda, the government pension scheme, actually got to buy at least 199 billion shillings worth of shares. Now, this was after the extension. And then during this extension, there were incentives that were actually brought on board. One of them being the subsidization of the price from 100 shillings for retail investors to about 60 shillings. And then from 100 shillings to about 47 shillings for institutional investors. Which is really a very great incentive, because for a stock to be cut more than 50%, that's very accommodating, a very huge favor indeed that they did for institutional investors. And NSSF did not take any chances. They did go all in and invested in Airtel Uganda, 199 billion. So that's briefly the story that we have amongst these telecommunications companies. Ever since listing, Airtel Uganda stock has declined in price from 100 shillings to the current 91 shillings. However, MTN Uganda as well has been grappling with pricing from 200 shillings in the IPO to currently 170 shillings. But also, MTN has had its ups and downs on the market. Just a couple of days after listing, the stock dropped from 200 shillings to 160, but then later on down from 160, up from 160, the stock went to over 180 and maximum of about 190 in the year 2022 and 2023. And now we are talking about averages of about 170 shillings. So it still makes it one of the really most expensive stocks as well on the market. Now, currently, it holds about 3.81 trillion Ugandan shillings, making a representation of about 24.2% of the entire equity market of the Uganda Securities Exchange. Now, this representation makes MTN the #1 most valuable stock on the Uganda Stock Exchange. And currently, within the parameters of the exchange, they are indeed the most valuable stock on the market, with over 22.4 billion shares that are listed and a market capitalization of close to 4 trillion. Year-to-date performances haven't been as well that good, at a negative loss of about 0.32%. And when you look at the 4-week performance, at least 0.58% has been shed off as well from MTN Uganda. MTN Uganda, however, is the third most traded on stock as well on the exchange, which is one great factor you can look out for in case you're looking to invest in MTN. It is the third most traded on stock. So that's a pretty good deal for you to actually consider a stock. Besides MTN, National Insurance Corporation had 50,000 shares and ended the day with 6.5 shillings. Now, for NIC, what stood out for NIC last year? They were unable to issue a dividend. That's number one. However, they did issue what we call a rights issue. Now, investors benefit from investments in stock exchanges in different ways, depending on the situations around the investment. One of the ways you can benefit from a stock is through what we call rights issues. Now, I talked about the bonus issue, like the one that Bank of Baroda issued, but there's also what we call a rights issue. Rights issue is where specific stocks or specific shares are put in place in, of course, looking at only the investors that have already invested in the company, and they're allocated as per share and given to investors for free. In other words, if you had, for example, a bonus share of 2 extra shares per share, it would mean that if someone had on every share that someone held with the company that year, they're going to be added 2 extra shares. So that means that someone is going to become 3 times richer, so to say, richer in terms of the stock they hold on the company. So this is what NIC has been doing. And the results have been very clear. Sometimes they haven't been able to attain their targets or their profits, but also the tough regulatory environment under which they operate, and of course the lack of knowledge of the insurance business in Uganda, which has kept the business still on a very small scale. So some of those factors lead to what we see as rights issues or bonus issues. And we would prefer bonus issue, a rights issue, instead of nothing at all. Sometimes people think these are a must give. No, there's nowhere it's written in the rules of listing that every company should issue dividends. It's not a must, though it is a requirement that at least whenever you make a profit, you have a dividend issued for your shareholders or your investors. That is something that the exchange and the companies that are listed on the counters always observe, which is pretty interesting. Umeme Limited is at 1,900 in volume. Yes, Umeme is closing business this year in Uganda. We don't know what's next, but what we know is that Umeme will be shutting down, and this is following the expiration of their concession with the government of Uganda to serve the country in the supply and distribution of electricity for the past 20 years, since 2004. This has been done by Umeme. However, the government decided not to renew their concession. And following that announcement, there was a lot of scramble for the shares at Umeme, and we saw the price rise through the roof following this particular this particular announcement. And now currently the stock is valued at 400 shillings per share and has been stuck here for quite a while, over about 5 months or so. And that's it from mainly the counters here on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Following through the indices, the all-share index inched up at least 0.68 points, and this was up to at least 870.94 points, whereas when you look at closing the closing percentages, it closed off at a weekly loss of 2% and a 4-week loss of 0.63%. That is the all-share index. The local company index, which tracks the aggregate performance of the domestic stocks, at least decreased rather by 0.1%, down to at least 269 points on the exchange. That's it from Uganda. Follow for more at use.org.ug and get to know how your stock is performing. It's very important for you to make personal research. Of course, financial markets will be bringing you some of these updates, but also you must have the effort to be able to put into your stock, knowing your portfolio and how you're tracking it. It goes a long way in improving your investment plans and also improving the way you see things in the financial markets, which is very, very important for you in order to make money off the stock market. I'm continuing here with the Nairobi Securities Exchange, NSE, the busiest stock exchange within East Africa. At least over about 43 companies participated in trade, and the day ended with at least 13 gainers and 21 losers. Home Africa led the gainers with a gain of at least 8.33% to an appreciation of about 0.39 per share, and followed by Scan Group at 6.75% appreciation, and eGads at 6.54% appreciation. TransCentury at least had about 4.44% appreciation in price as well. On the losing side, the Sanlam Kenya came out last with an end of day price depreciation of 7.89%, and that's how we are performing currently at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. But of course, news coming in, like I mentioned earlier, from Nairobi Securities Exchange, also concerning Kenya Airways. The company has been in the red for quite some time, and that has been a concern for most of the shareholders at the company. However, looking at the data from KQ, they are hoping to be able to raise more money and be able to raise their game this time round and make more money. And their June targets are yet to be at least unveiled. Kenya Airways has exuded hope of getting an investor for the ailing Kenya Airways company by June, even as it pursues parallel operations, merging the national carrier with profitable state farms and selling them as a package. Disclosure by the Treasury to the International Monetary Fund show that the new investor will be expected to pump cash into the loss-making airline, with the government keen to win it off at least frequent cash support. The report released by IMF on Wednesday last week showed that government is pursuing the two options: engaging a potential equity investor through a consultant procured in December, and exploring the possibility of privatization of the airline through merging the airline with other target companies, especially offshore, and setting up a fund to manage as well these companies, but aiming to close either the deal by the end of June. Very, very good news coming in from KQ indeed, and we look forward to those mergers. What will be the decision? We'll be telling you as the story unfolds. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for watching Smart 24 TV. The TV is here to give you business 24 hours, 7 days a week, and financial markets gives you a touch of what's happening in the stock market, in the fixed income market, as well as in the unit trusts within the region and for the rest of the world. My name is Anthony. Have a wonderful night. Good night. See you next time.